Neighborhood was peaceful until she arrived, Karen clipboard in hand, eyes sharper than a hawk scanning for violations. She wasn't just any HOA board member, she was a one-woman suburban dictatorship. She fined people for leaves on their driveway, measured grass with a ruler, and once reported a garden gnome for being too aggressive. But when she tried to claim my property as a public road, she messed with the wrong homeowner, and that's when the real battle began. DOI sun beamed down on a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where people waved at each other in passing but mostly kept to themselves. The air smelled of fresh-cut grass and barbecue smoke, a peaceful retreat from the chaos of the outside world. At least that's what it was supposed to be. For years life had been simple here. Neighbors maintained their homes, kids rode their bikes, and occasional block parties were the biggest source of drama. But then, like an unexpected storm cloud rolling in, she arrived, Karen. Now every neighborhood has a Karen, but this one, she was in a league of her own, middle-aged, with a signature short bob and an ever-present clipboard. She was the self-appointed queen of the cul-de-sac. She walked with an air of importance, always on the lookout for any sign of non-compliance with her unwritten rules. It was as if she believed the highway bylaws were personally dictated to her from a higher power. I'd managed to avoid her for a while, just another face in the neighborhood, until the day I unknowingly committed my first crime against her kingdom. My offense: parking my truck in my own driveway. I was watering my plants when I first heard it, the sound of deliberate, impatient footsteps on the pavement. Turning my head, I saw Karen marching toward me, clipboard in hand, an expression so stern you'd think I just declared war on the community. She cleared her throat, dramatically flipping through a stack of papers as if she were about to deliver a courtroom ruling. Excuse me, she began, her voice dripping with forced politeness, but I need to inform you that this, she pointed at my truck with an accusatory finger, is a violation. I blinked. A violation of what? She sighed as though explaining something to a child. It's against highway regulations to leave a commercial vehicle in a driveway overnight. I glanced at my truck, a plain pickup, no company logos, nothing remotely commercial about it. This isn't a commercial vehicle, I said, confused. Karen pursed her lips. It looks like one. That was my first taste of HOA. Karen, I see. If it could be a violation, then in her mind it was a violation. I politely told her my truck was well within the HOA guidelines and went back to watering my plants. Karen, however, wasn't one to accept defeat easily. She stood there for a long moment, arms crossed, eyes squinted as though searching for her next point of attack. Then she spotted it. Your grass, she announced dramatically, is overgrown. I looked down at my perfectly normal lawn. What? It's at least an inch too long, she said, as if I had committed a crime against nature itself. That's a violation. I couldn't help but chuckle. Karen, are you measuring my lawn with your eyes? I don't need to, she sniffed. I have a trained eye for these things. And just like that, I had officially landed on Karen's radar. From that day forward, she made it her mission to monitor my property like a hawk, convinced that I was some sort of neighborhood menace. At first it was almost amusing. She'd show up unannounced, rattling off AR rules or pointing out non-existent infractions. One time she left a printed notice on my door accusing my mailbox of being half an inch too tall. Another time she tried to fine me for having an unauthorized garden gnome in my yard, but it wasn't until she set her sights on my driveway that things really escalated. You see, my property had a small and used pathway on the side, technically part of my lot, but wide enough that people sometimes cut through it instead of walking around the block. It had never been a problem until Karen decided it should be. One day I noticed Karen standing at the edge of the pathway, arms crossed, staring at it like it had personally offended her. This, she declared, should be open for public use. I raised an eyebrow. It's my property. Yes, but it would be so much more convenient if everyone could use it, she said, smiling in a way that wasn't really a smile. After all, this is our neighborhood. I let out a slow breath, already sensing where this was going. Karen, this is private property. I don't want random people walking through my yard, she gasped, as if I just announced I was tearing down the whole neighborhood. You can't do that. That's selfish. I shook my head. No, that's called owning property. That was the moment Karen decided I was officially the villain in her HOA kingdom. The next morning I woke up to find a bright orange violation notice taped to my door. The reason: obstructing a community pathway, except there was no community pathway. It was my land. That's when I realized something. Karen wasn't just an annoyance. She was on a power trip, and she had no intention of backing down. Little did she know I wasn't backing down either, and thus the war with HOA. Karen began the first violation Notice was just the beginning. It was as if Karen had decided that I was her personal project, a rogue homeowner in need of strict correction. Every morning she would parade past my house, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning for some imagined infraction. If didn't find anything, she would make something up. One morning I stepped outside to grab the newspaper and saw Karen standing on the sidewalk glaring at my front porch as if she had just caught me sacrificing a garden gnome in some forbidden ritual. What now, Karen? I asked, not even pretending to be polite. She dramatically flipped through her stack of papers. Your porch light is too bright at night, she announced. I blinked. It's a standard LED bulb. She nodded as if I had just confirmed her greatest fear. Exactly, it's disruptive to the neighborhood aesthetic. I resisted the urge to laugh. Karen, it's a porch light. It's supposed to be bright, not that bright, she countered, scribbling something on her clipboard. It's a safety concern for who? Vampires. She didn't appreciate the joke. Instead, she shoved a pre-written violation notice into my hand. Consider this a friendly warning. I stared at the paper. She had actually typed it out, meaning she had been planning this. Karen, do you have a job? I asked. Genuinely curious, she gasped, clutching her clipboard like a pearl necklace. Excuse me, being on the HOA is a job. There it was, the self-importance, the delusion of power. Karen didn't just enforce the HOA rules, she created them. Whether they existed or not, things only escalated from there. A few days later I found another notice on my door. This time it claimed that my trash bins were placed 2 in outside of the designated collection area. Karen, are you measuring my trash cans? I asked, holding up the absurd violation notice. She didn't even blink. Garbage placement is a serious matter. We can't have ISER ruining the community. They were literally where the garbage truck picks them up. Well, she said, crossing her arms, I suggest you move them slightly to the left, otherwise I'll have to report it to who? The trash police. Karen pursed her lips, clearly not amused. Just fix it. At first I tried to ignore her, but the violations kept coming, one ridiculous claim after another. Your mailbox isn't HOA approved. It was your lawn edging isn't uniform. It was your front door color is too bold for the neighborhood. It was literally beige. It became a game for her every day. A new excuse to harass me every day, another absurd demand, and then she crossed the line. One afternoon I came home to find Karen on my property, clipboard in hand. She was crouched down in my front yard with a ruler measuring my grass. I stepped out of my car, slowly watching in disbelief. Karen, what the hell are you doing? She gasped, leaping to her feet like I had just caught her committing a crime, which technically I had. This is an inspection, she said, straightening her posture. I crossed my arms. An inspection by who? The whole lawn police. She held up her ruler like it was a badge of authority. Your grass is too long, by at least a chew of an inch. I rubbed my temples. Karen, you're trespassing, she scoffed. I'm not. I'm simply ensuring compliance with the HOA regulations, which don't give you the right to enter my property. Well, she sniffed, if you maintained your yard properly, I wouldn't have to. I had to take a deep breath to stop myself from laughing in her face. Karen, I'm going to say this one time, get off my lawn. She pointed at me like an angry school teacher. I'll have you know that refusal to comply with the highway landscaping standards can result in serious consequences. I took a step forward, and I'll have you know that trespassing can also result in serious consequences. For the first time, Karen hesitated. She pursed her lips, narrowed her eyes, and gave me a look that said she wasn't done with me. Then, without another word, she turned on her heel and marched away. But I knew this wasn't over, and I was right. The next day, I woke up to find a new official complaint from the HOA in my mailbox. It was different from Karen's usual nonsense. It actually had the HOA letterhead on it. She had gone over my head, according to the letter. I was in violation of multiple neighborhood regulations, including obstructing a community pathway. I stood there, rereading it twice, trying to process the sheer audacity. Karen was actually trying to claim my private property as a public road. That's when I knew this wasn't just Karen being annoying. The moment I saw the official HOA complaint, I knew Karen had escalated from being a nosy nuisance to a full-blown dictator of suburban ridiculousness, trying to claim my private property as a public road. That was next-level entitlement. I took a deep breath, folded the letter, and calmly walked back inside. I wasn't going to lose my cool. No, this required a different approach. I decided to play along, at least for now. The first step, understanding my enemy, I went online, pulled up the bylaws, and read through them carefully. It didn't take long to find the truth. Nowhere did it say anything about private property being turned into community access. My land was legally mine, no matter what Karen wanted. Armed with this knowledge, I decided to have a little fun the next time Karen Strutted by clipboard clutched tightly like it was the HOA's holy book, I greeted her with a pleasant smile. Morning, Karen. She squinted at me, sensing something was off. Did you get the notice? Oh, I sure did, I said, nodding. I have to say it was very informative. Her smugness grew. Good then. You understand that you'll need to remove the obstruction. I tilted my head. You mean my property? Her lips pursed. That's not the point. The neighborhood needs that access. I pretended to think about it. I suppose I could allow it. Her eyes widened with excitement. Really? But I'd need to make sure it's up to standard. That's when I got to work. The next morning I went to the hardware store and picked up a no trespassing sign, the biggest one they had. I installed it right in the center of the pathway. Then I added a small picket fence, technically temporary but just annoying enough to be an obstacle. That afternoon Karen showed up, gasping dramatically at the sight. What is this? She shrieked, pointing at the sign as if I had declared war on the entire neighborhood. I crossed my arms. Oh, just taking your advice. If this is going to be a public pathway, I want to make sure it's properly regulated. You can't just block it off, she snapped. I pulled out my phone and tapped the highway bylaws I had saved. Actually, I can. According to Section 8, Article 4, any modifications to private property require official HOA approval, which includes, get this, community access roads. Karen's face turned red. She was struggling. I could see her mind trying to twist reality into something that fit her narrative. I didn't give her the chance. Oh, and since you care so much about compliance, I added, I also submitted a request to the HOA to install a gate, just in case liability concerns. Her eyes nearly popped out of her head. A gate? You're making this worse. I shrugged. Just being a good neighbor. Karen stormed off, mumbling under her breath. But I wasn't done. The next day I took my retaliation up a notch. I bought motion-activated sprinklers. You see, one of Karen's favorite things to do was linger in front of my property, staring at my house like she was mentally planning her next complaint. So I installed the sprinklers right along the edge of the pathway and set them on a timer, but with a manual override. That afternoon Karen strutted over with yet another notice in hand. She stepped exactly where I knew she would. I pressed the button. Whoosh, a jet of water blasted her right in the legs. She shrieked, jumping backward, waving her clipboard in a frenzy. What was that? She screeched, shaking out her soaked capris. I really tried to keep a straight face. Oh wow, must be the new water feature I installed, keeps the area nice and green. Karen glared at me, dripping wet. You did that on purpose, I gasped, figging innocence. Karen, are you accusing me of setting up my personal landscaping just to inconvenience someone? She clenched her jaw. You're going to regret this. And with that she stomped off, muttering about filing a new complaint. I smiled. Let her try. Word spreads fast in a neighborhood, especially when there's an ongoing HOA showdown. It didn't take long before people started whispering about my public pathway dispute with Karen. At first I wasn't sure where my neighbors stood. Some of them had been quiet about Karen's antics, maybe out of fear of being her next target, but the moment she got sprayed by my motion-activated sprinklers, that changed everything. It started with Tom from next door. Tom was a retired firefighter who had lived in the neighborhood for over 20 years. The guy kept to himself, but the moment he saw Karen get drenched, he lost it, laughing so hard I thought he might need medical assistance. Later that evening he walked over, still chuckling, and handed me a cold beer that he said, shaking his head, was the best thing I've seen all year. I clinked bottles with him. She had it coming. Oh, no doubt about it. I've been waiting for someone to stand up to her. He took a sip of his drink and smirked. You just became a legend in this neighborhood. Over the next few days I started noticing something interesting. People who normally kept their heads down were suddenly very interested in my battle with Karen. Neighbors who had been victims of her ridiculous complaints began sharing their own stories at the mailbox. Linda, the sweet lady who baked cookies for the whole street every Christmas, leaned in and whispered she tried to fine me $50 for having my Halloween decorations up 2 days past October. Down the street, Dave, the guy who always seemed to be fixing something in his garage, grinned at me. I saw you put up that no trespass Angie sign. Bold move. Even Mrs. Patel, who was usually neutral on all things HOA, gave me an approving nod while watering her flowers. Turns out everyone had a Karen story. She once tried to ban red mulch from front yards because it was too aggressive of a color. She measured fences with a tape measure to make sure they were exactly HOA regulation height. She reported a family for having too many potted plants on their porch, and the more people shared, the bolder they got. One night I was sitting outside when I saw something incredible. Someone had placed a line of garden gnomes right along the sidewalk in front of Karen's house. By the next morning more gnomes had appeared. By the end of the week there were at least 15 of them, all Facing her front door like a tiny army, Karen was furious. She stomped around the cul-de-sac, demanding to know who was responsible. No one confessed, and the best part, HOA rules said nothing about garden gnomes. Then the holiday lights were started. Karen had once tried to ban multicolored Christmas lights because she thought they looked tacky. According to her, only white lights were allowed. So that year, as soon as December hit, the neighborhood responded the only way they knew how. Every single house put up the brightest, most obnoxiously colorful Christmas lights possible, inflatable Santas, flashing reindeer, candy cane walkways. Even Tom, the retired firefighter, strung up a blinking Mary Karen Moss sign on his roof. It was beautiful. Karen lost her mind. She stormed into the highway meeting with a binder labeled neighborhood offenders, demanding action. I have photographic evidence of these violations, she declared, slamming her stack of complaints onto the table. The HOA president, Mr. Sullivan, who is usually pretty patient, said, Karen, none of these decorations violate the HOA rules. Excessive, she snapped. That's not an enforceable rule, Karen said. Then we should make it one. That's when Dave, the guy who always worked in his garage, spoke up. You know what, Karen, you could propose that rule, but then we'd also have to review some of the older rules too. Karen frowned. What do you mean? Well, Dave said, casually flipping through the HOA handbook, it says here that all trash cans must be removed from the curb within 12 hours of collection, and yet I seem to recall seeing yours out for, what was it, 2 days last week. Karen's face turned red. That was an exception, Tom smirked. Oh, I'm sure it was. Linda leaned forward. And wasn't it you who had an unapproved yard sign last election season? Karen's eyes darted around. Well, that was Mrs. Patel added. Oh, and let's not forget the time your dog was off-leash in the community park. That's a $75 violation. Karen was speechless. For the first time, she realized something. She wasn't untouchable anymore. The very rules she used to control everyone else, they could be used against her too. Karen stormed out of the meeting, red-faced and fumbling for words, and just like that, the neighborhood turned against her. For years, she had bullied people into submission, but now she wasn't the enforcer anymore. She was the enemy, and she knew it. Karen was losing her grip on the neighborhood, and she knew it. The HOA meeting had been the first major blow. She had walked in expecting to lay down the law, only to be confronted with her own violations, and now with the neighbors uniting against her, she was running out of ways to wield her clipboard of doom. But of course she wasn't going down without a fight. The next morning, I woke up to find another HOA violation notice taped to my door. Unauthorized obstruction of community access. I groaned. She was still trying to claim that my property was a public pathway. At this point, it was pure desperation. I took the notice, marched straight to Karen's house, and knocked. She answered with her usual smug look, arms crossed. Yes, I held up the violation slip. Karen, we've been over this is my property. She gave me a condescending smile. The hoe has determined. No, you have determined. Show me the bylaw that says I have to let people walk through my yard, she faltered. It's about community safety. I laughed. Karen, you don't care about safety, you just want control. Her face darkened. You have 2 days to remove that obstruction, or I will have no choice but to escalate. I narrowed my eyes. And what exactly does that mean? She smirked. I guess you'll find out that night. I installed security cameras just in case. I was glad I did. Karen's most absurd move yet. The next morning, I checked the footage at 2:37 a.m. Guess who was creeping around my property with a measuring tape? Karen. She was actually measuring my fence height. I rewound the footage. She had spent 45 minutes pacing my yard, taking notes, and even trying to peek over my fence. I shook my head. She was losing it. That afternoon, I printed screenshots of the security footage and attached them to a formal highway complaint against Karen. I walked straight to the HOA office and handed the packet to Mr. Sullivan, the HOA president. He flipped through the pages, his eyebrows raising. She was on your property middle of the night. I confirmed. If that's not harassment, I don't know what is. He let out a sigh. This isn't the first complaint we've had about her, but with actual video evidence. He shook his head. I'll take care of it. I smirked. Game over. Karen calls the cops on herself. That evening, I was sitting on my porch when I saw Karen pacing back and forth in front of my house, phone pressed to her ear. A few minutes later, 2 police cars rolled up. I leaned back in my chair, watching as she frantically waved her arms, pointing at my property like I had buried nuclear secrets in my front yard. One of the officers approached me. Sir, this woman claimed you're obstructing a public walkway. I sighed and handed him my property deed. Nope, this is private property. Karen's face twisted. Hewn, lying. That's supposed to be a public access path. The officer looked at her. Ma'am, do you have any legal documents proving that? Karen blinked. Well, the HOA rules Say rules don't override property laws. The cop interrupted. This is his land. He can put up a fence if he wants. Karen turned bright red, but it's community concern. The officer sigh. Ma'am, you called us over a private property dispute that isn't illegal. If you keep doing this, you might be looking at a harassment charge. Karen's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. She spun on her heel and stormed off. The officer turned back to me, shaking his head. You deal with this a lot every day. Well, you've got it handled, he said before driving off. The final HOA meeting. Karen's downfall. A few days later, the HOA scheduled an emergency meeting, and I knew exactly why. By the time I arrived, the room was buzzing. Karen was already seated at the front, arms crossed, looking like a furious PTA mom who just found out there were 2 cupcakes per student instead of 3. Mr. Sullivan cleared his throat. We need to discuss multiple complaints regarding improper enforcement of HOA regulations. Karen sat up straighter. Yes, I'd like to formally report. He held up a hand. Not you, Ken. About you. The room went silent. Karen's face dropped. What? Sullivan picked up a folder thick with documents. We have multiple reports of harassment, fabricated violations, and unauthorized trespassing. He slid the security footage across the table. We also received video evidence of you entering private property at 2:37 a.m. Karen's eyes darted around. I was just checking compliance. Karen. Sullivan cut in, pinching the bridge of his nose. You are not an HOA enforcer, you're a resident. Karen's mouth opened. But you've been abusing your position to target neighbors, issue fake violations, and involve law enforcement over personal disputes. Someone in the back muttered about time. Karen gripped the edges of her chair, shaking her head. This is a setup. I have been doing my duty. Your duty, Tom scoffed. You reported my dog for looking at you funny. The room erupted. Linda stood up. You find me for my garden gnome. Dave threw his hands up. You measured my driveway cracks and tried to find me per inch. Mr. Sullivan let out a long sigh. Karen, it's clear that your behavior is causing disruption in the community. Karen looked wild. I was only doing what's best for you. Are officially removed from any HOA involvement, Sullivan announced, and if we receive one more complaint about you harassing residents, we will pursue legal action. Karen's face went white. She tried to protest, but meeting adjourned, and just like that, Karen's reign ended. The aftermath, sweet karma. After Karen was stripped of her HOA power, she became a ghost. Gone were the days of her clipboard inspections, gone were the constant complaints, and then one day a for sale sign appeared in her yard. Karen was moving. The neighborhood celebrated. On her last day, I saw her loading boxes into her car, scowling at the world as she walked past my house. I couldn't resist. I waved. Need help measuring the moving truck? Looks a little too long for the driveway. Karen shot me a look that could kill a small plant. I grinned, and with that she drove off, leaving the neighborhood. Karen free. For the first time in years, we could all breathe easy. No more fake violations, no more absurd rules, no more power-tripping HOA nonsense. The grass grew freely. The mail boxes stood proudly, and no one, not one single person, missed her. With Karen finally gone, the neighborhood felt lighter, like a dark cloud had lifted. It was almost surreal after years of her relentless clipboard patrols. There were no more ridiculous violation notices, no more unexpected confrontations, no more power trips disguised as HOA enforcement. The first week without Karen was eerily peaceful. I half expected to wake up to find a new notice taped to my door, or to see her marching around measuring things that didn't need measuring, but the only thing I found on my property was a sense of freedom and the neighborhood. Oh, we celebrated the No More Karen party. Tom, the retired firefighter, was the first to suggest we should have a block party, he said, grinning, to celebrate the end of the HOA regime. By the time word spread, everyone was on board. Dave offered to fire up his grill for a full-blown barbecue. Linda, the sweetest lady on the block, promised to bring her famous homemade pies. Even Mr. Patel, who had never been much for gatherings, said he'd set up an outdoor movie night in his driveway, and for the first time in years, people were excited to come together without fear of getting a fine for excessive social gatherings. The night of the party, the street was alive. Lights were strung between houses, kids ran around playing, and neighbors who had once barely spoken were laughing and sharing drinks. At one point, Tom raised his beer and shouted to Karen, "May she never return." A cheer erupted. Someone even set up a Karen pata. But the best part, the decorations. Remember when Karen hated multicolored Christmas lights? Well, everyone brought them. We strung flashing rainbow lights across fences, wrapped them around mailboxes, and even had an inflatable Santa, just because it was the most festive, obnoxious, and glorious display of HOA rebellion ever. Karen's Final embarrassment, we thought Karen had left for good. We were wrong. The night of the party someone noticed a familiar car. Parked down the street, it was Karen sitting in her car watching the woman. Couldn't even let us celebrate her departure in peace. She wasn't even subtle about it. Her car's headlights were off, but everyone knew she was there. Linda leaned over to me and whispered, "Do you think she's taking mental notes?" Dave smirked. "I dare her to try and find me one last time." Then Tom the legend grabbed a paper plate full of barbecue, walked right over to Karen's car, and knocked on her window. She rolled it down just an inch. "Hey Karen," Tom said fearfully, "want a plate? It's a neighborhood party." "Oh wait, never mind. You're not part of the neighborhood anymore." She sped off so fast she almost hit a trash can. The entire street burst into laughter. Highway reforms undoing the Karen era. With Karen gone, the HOA had some serious damage control to do. At the next meeting, which was the first one anyone actually wanted to attend, Mr. Sullivan, the highway president, addressed the elephant in the room. "We may have let things get out of control," he admitted, flipping through a stack of ridiculous rules Karen had proposed over the years. No wind chimes over 5 in length denied, no aggressive-looking garden gnomes denied, all grass must be cut to precisely 1.5 in denied. The list went on and on. Then Sullivan did something shocking. "I'd like to propose removing all unnecessary HOA fines and rolling back some of the more questionable regulations." Another cheer erupted. One by one, the worst of car rules were abolished. By the time the meeting ended, it felt like we had taken our neighborhood back. The petty cherry on top. Now I thought the Karen saga was over. I was ready to move on, but fate had one last gift for me. A few months later, I was out running errands when I spotted something that made me do a double take. Karen at the grocery store. I almost walked past her, but then I noticed something glorious. She was wearing a work vest, and in her hands a price scanner. Karen was working at the store. I couldn't help myself. I walked right up to her register, casually dropping my items onto the counter. She scanned the first one without making eye contact, but when she looked up and saw me, her face twisted into a grimace. "Hello, Karen," I said, grinning. "I'd like to file a complaint." I twitched. "Excuse me." I gestured at the checkout conveyor belt. "This line is obstructed. It's not up to H standards." Her grip on the scanner tightened. I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice. "Just for her. Oh, and before I forget, you might want to check the store policy. I think your name tag isn't properly aligned." She glared daggers at me, but she couldn't say a thing because now I had the power. She scanned my items in angry silence, handed me my receipt, and muttered, "Have a nice day." I smiled. "Oh, I will." "And Karen," she hesitated. "What?" I tapped the receipt. "Make sure you're in compliance." Then I walked away, victorious. Epilogue: a car-free life. The neighborhood thrived after Karen left. No more bogus violations, no more clipboard inspections, no more fear of being fined for an unauthorized mailbox. Instead, we got block parties, we got friendly neighbors, we got peace, and the best part, no one ever dared to take Karen's place. The legend of her downfall was too powerful. Years later, when new residents moved in and asked, "Hey, why does everyone in this neighborhood hate garden gnomes?" we'd laugh and say, "Oh, let us tell you the story of Karen." With Karen gone, life in the neighborhood felt strangely peaceful. It was like the community had collectively exhaled, shaking off years of pent-up frustration from her never-ending highway dictatorship. For the first time in forever, people started to enjoy their homes without worrying about whether their porch lights were too bright or if their grass was a core inch too long. Neighbors who had once avoided each other, united by their mutual care and trauma, now waved when passing by. Even stopping to chat, it was as if the HOA had been haunted by a bureaucratic ghost, and now that she was gone, the air was lighter, and I finally got to enjoy my property without feeling like I was starring in an episode of Neighborhood Surveillance. Karen edition: no more bogus violation notices, no more clipboard inspections at sunrise, no more random rule adjustments that only applied to me. It was glorious. Karen's lasting legacy. Kind of now you might think that after all this people would want to forget Karen ever existed, but the truth, her legend was too powerful to disappear. Her greatest hits became inside jokes around the neighborhood. Whenever someone got a leaf on their driveway, we'd say, "Better watch out, Karen would have fined you for that." If a gnome appeared in someone's yard, it was an unspoken challenge. Who could keep it there the longest before Karen's ghost tried to remove it? When someone got a new mailbox, we joke, "Did you measure it? Is it HOA-approved?" Tom, being the absolute legend, he was even framed a copy of one of Karen's old complaint notices and hung it in his garage like a war trophy. And every year on the anniversary of Karen's last stand, someone would sneak a tiny garden gnome onto Tom's lawn. He always pretended to be annoyed, but secretly he loved it. New HOA era, a good one for once. With Karen gone, the HOA had no choice but to change. Instead of treating it like a miniature government, the board members focused on actual community improvement. Things people cared about, like fixing the broken streetlights instead of measuring people's fence height, using HOA funds for block parties instead of Karen's personal complaint printing service, making sure the neighborhood actually felt welcoming instead of being a battleground of nonsense rules. HOA meetings, once miserable affairs where people just braced for Karen's next decree, actually became productive, and you know what, people actually attended them. For the first time in years, the HOA was actually doing what it was supposed to do, helping the community, not policing it. One last Karen encounter, because of course now you might think that was the end of Karen's story, but life is funny. One random Saturday afternoon, I was at the hardware store buying some stuff to fix up my backyard when I turned down an aisle and froze, because standing right there looking at paint samples was Karen. I almost laughed. She didn't see me at first and I debated just walking away, but then she turned. Our eyes met. Her expression twisted, part embarrassment, part residual anger, part realization that she had lost. I gave her the biggest grin possible. "Hey Karen," I said, as friendly as possible. "Long time no see." Her jaw tightened, then without a word she turned on her heel and stormed off. I couldn't help but chuckle. Even outside the HOA, Karen couldn't handle not being in control, and that was the best revenge of all. The final joke: a few years after Karen left, a new family moved into her old house. Super nice people, no clipboards, no complaints, no HOA power trips, but the best part, they painted the house neon blue, something Karen would have absolutely hated, and every time I drive past it I smile, because in the end we won. What was your favorite moment of Karen's downfall? Which part made you laugh the most? If you could add one more final karma moment, what would it be? If you enjoyed watching Karen get what she deserved, do me a favor, hit that like button. Every like helps keep HOA Karens from rising to power again. Face with tears of joy. And if you love petty justice, neighborhood drama, and HOA chaos, make sure to subscribe. I've got plenty more wild stories coming your way, and trust me, you won't want to miss them. Bell, turn on notifications so you'll know immediately when a new story drops, because let's be real, who doesn't love seeing a Karen get some well-earned karma? Speech balloon. Drop a comment below and let me know your worst HOA experience, or just tell me what part of Karen's downfall was your favorite.